Okay.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, of course.
Could you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Oof. Don't know where to begin. Well, I was born in California. I guess I could start there. Um, I lived in Reno for a little bit. I was basically raised in northern Nevada. But I guess my mom and my dad's relationship wasn't very healthy. They didn't end up together. My biological dad left when I was fairly young. I think before I was in second grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if I'm being totally open and transparent, it was an abusive relationship with them. And, it ended because it became an attempted murder from my mom. So.
From your mom attempting to murder your dad?
Vice versa.
Your dad attempting to murder?
Yeah. And my mom didn't really handle that very well. I don't think anybody really would.
How old were you when that happened?
I don't remember the exact age, but I know I was in first grade, I want to say, because I know when we ended up moving, I was in second grade at that point. So, yeah, I was in first grade when it happened. My mom didn't handle it very well, like I'd mentioned. So I know that she fell into drinking. So, yeah.
Did your dad go to jail for that?
No, he fled, actually. Never really knew where he ended up. I know that he's tried to contact me, tried to contact my mom and some of my siblings on multiple occasions. I didn't really respond to any of it. But I know my mother has, in the past, tried to get in contact to figure out where he was. She would always tell me it was more so because she was trying to get him arrested for what had happened. I never necessarily believed that part, but yeah.
When did the reality of that hit you? Like, how old were you when you started to really kind of conceptualize the seriousness of what had happened?
I guess I knew right away. I was at my dad's sister's house, I guess my aunt, and my mom's sister came to pick us up. Me and my brother at the time, I think my little sister too. And I remember when we were there, she had the conversation with my siblings and I saying, hey, it's really close to Halloween. I just want you guys to know that your mom's wearing Halloween makeup. Don't be concerned. Don't get too, worried about her. And I remember when I had saw her, I knew immediately that it was not makeup, because she had some pretty serious bruising to the face and to the point where her eye wouldn't open. And it just was very clear to me that it wasn't makeup. But there were, after my mom and my dad split, there were a lot of things that had happened that I guess seemed normal to me up until my mom lost custody. And that's when I realized, okay, well, this wasn't okay. But that I was...
Such as, what do you mean, for example? What seemed normal?
So my mom, she became a single mother at the time, and she was a nurse, so she worked nights. And me and my brother, me being in first grade, him being probably in second grade, we would get each other up for school, and we would walk to school, and we would, kind of fend for ourselves, make ourselves food. We'd come home from school, and she would be working, so we would have to take care of our little sister, who at the time was an infant. So it was, small instances like eating dry oatmeal or I'd be thirsty, so I would go in the fridge and there'd be wine coolers and I thought it was juice, things like that I definitely realized after my grandma took custody of us, those probably weren't normal circumstances. There was a time a teacher came by and gave me a backpack and a toothbrush because I didn't own one of those. So I think those were instances where I kind of knew, but it definitely progressively got worse as I got older, and I guess that kind of helped me solidify that things weren't really right.
What was part of that progression when you got older? Like, what was it like when you were 15, 16, 17? Were you still even with your parents? With your mom?
So my mom, by the time I was in fourth grade, we had moved to LA, and she got remarried, but she by that time, I'm pretty sure was already an alcoholic. By the time I was in fourth grade, and she ended up getting pregnant with my little brother. So I have a little brother with a different dad as well. And she was, drinking throughout the pregnancy. That was something that I knew was very wrong. After she had my little brother, I was in junior high, I believe. And she started, just becoming a non-functional alcoholic by that point, getting abusive with me. I was actually surprisingly one of the only kids of all four of her kids that she was abusive with. And a lot of the times I contribute it now that I'm older and I understand things a little bit more to her PTSD from my dad. Because some of the things that she had told me when she was under the influence and when she was drunk and abusive was that, like, I had the same eyes as my dad, so she couldn't stand to look at me, or, things like that that really, when I was old enough to understand, kind of put in perspective to me that she might have had PTSD.
And those things had nothing to do with you. How'd you find ways to deal with that, when you were younger and then to where you're at now?
Oh man, there's just so many things that have happened in between those. When I was younger, I kind of rebelled a lot, if I'm honest. I tried to not be home as much as possible. I had a best friend that I stayed with, and her family had a bed for me in their place, and she was always talking about how they wanted to take custody of me, but didn't want to just take me out of the equation because I had siblings and whatnot. So I think I just heavily relied on my friends at the time. But it's hard to say exactly how I coped, because I know that, I ended up on probation when I was in junior high and was on probation through high school.
Probation for?
Well, I guess the first time I got arrested, one was from running away. The second one, I was stealing food from Safeway, mainly because I was hungry. And then there was, just other things. Like, I know I was, smoking weed at that time. So when I was in junior high, they did a search on me, a strip search, which I thought was really interesting, being in junior high. And they found like one little stem of marijuana.
It was a girl cop though, which is.
The crazy thing, it was a nurse at school. They had brought in a nurse at school. I do think it was a girl, if I remember. But then they brought in cops later. So I thought that was another interesting thing. But yeah, they found one little stem in the bottom of my bag, which I didn't even know was there, to be honest. So yeah, I got arrested at school for that. Those types of things. But
what was the biggest takeaway from looking back from both your parents? Your lack of your father being there, and the traumatic experiences when he was there, and then just your whole mom. What do you take away from that now?
Well, it's hard to say, because my mom now, she's been passed since I was 15. And she, even when she was alive, she didn't really take good care of her kids. So, me and my older brother kind of had to step up and do those things. So I think the things that we struggle with most, especially now, because my older brother has my youngest brother, who's 16 right now, is like, we know at the end of the day that she did the best that she could, with what she had. But we have a lot of kind of resentment, because we're left to deal with the consequences of, like, her actions,
How'd she pass, if you don't mind me asking?
Drinking. Yeah, she had liver failure. So, and they told us probably 5 years before it actually happened, like, if she doesn't stop, she's going to pass away. And the way that she passed was actually pretty tragic. Since the cops were called so many times from her drinking and her abuse, my stepdad, who she had married, which I didn't know at the time, was an illegal. And they continuously asked for IDs every time the cops were called on my mom, so they eventually found out that he had a fake green card. And my little brother at the time was maybe 1. when they came by the house, and I remember, they were asking, and they called him by a name I didn't recognize, and it's like, oh, he just ran to the store real quick, and so when he got back, I was like, hey, the cops were looking for you. I don't really know why, but here's their card. And he called him, and, next thing you know, he was being arrested. And he had some charges when he was 16 in LA, so he went to prison, I think, for 2 years. And then he got deported in Tijuana. And so after being in Tijuana for, I don't know, maybe a year or two, he had asked my mom for a divorce because he was like, well, we're in 2 separate countries. There's no way that I can come back to the States. And so my mom went to Mexico to try to save her marriage. And in being there, I guess she had found out that he had a girlfriend already. And so she ended up passing out there, just drinking and, not taking care of herself like she usually did.
That's pretty tragic.
Yeah, there's a lot in my life.
To chase somebody and then drink yourself to death out there in a foreign country.
Yeah, sometimes I feel really guilty because, she tried to tell my family that he had a girlfriend, and with being the alcoholic that she was, she definitely, nobody really believed her, They were just kind of like, Darcy, just come home. You're being a little crazy. Like, I don't know why you went out there anyways.
Why wouldn't she come home? Do you know why?
I don't necessarily know. Part of it was her saying that she didn't have the money to, because she didn't really have the money to go out there in the first place. I think another part of it is she felt like more freedom to do what she wanted out there, because when she was back home, she felt a lot of pressure to stay sober and, go to rehab and get her stuff together for the kids that she had, And I think that she just kind of liked the freedom that she had out there to drink and not have to worry about the pressures of her responsibilities, but...
Did you feel loved from your parents?
I don't know. I mean, on the days that my mom was sober, yes. But I don't know. Sometimes it's a big question for me. Something I still kind of ask myself a lot. I mean, the times that my biological dad reached out to me, I thought, maybe he cares. Maybe, he was just ashamed of the things that he's done. But I just feel like there was a lack of effort on both ends. That kind of makes me doubt that they did.
What was your first experience with love? It can be anything. It can be a person, place, or thing. When you were like, man, I love this, or this is love, or like, we all have certain things.
I guess it's a good question. I would say, I don't know if it's my first experience, but just like friends. I think supportive friends is like one of the biggest things that I wasn't expecting, especially when I was going through some of the abuse that my mom had put me through. There were times that she would lock me out of the house, and having reliable friends where I could call at night and they would take me in at any time of the night. I think that meant a lot to me. It was a type of support that I hadn't gotten, I guess, from a lot of people.
How do you define love?
I guess through actions to me, and I guess that kind of explains why I sometimes doubt my parents' love for me, because I think love can be shown by actions more so than words.
How's that feel when you get the love in words and in action?
I guess just like reassurance, I guess is the word I come to. Like, I personally myself have a lot of trust issues, so when somebody says something, I'm kind of more like I receive it more in actions. But if I get both of them, it's kind of just a lot of reassurance. It makes me feel like reassured, and I guess cared about.
What inspires you?
I don't know. I guess when I was going to college, the things that inspired me really was to prove people wrong. And that's weird to say, but I was always kind of a scapegoat in my family. They always said I was a problem child, or I'd end up 16 and pregnant, and this and that. And I guess because I rebelled, which admittedly so. So a lot of the times, the things that would inspire me were kind of the hate that people gave me, the disbelief in my ability to do things. Now, I don't know. I guess it's just to...
How does that fuel feel? Like, I know what it's like to be inspired by, love, by fear, by hate. Like, these are different fuels that kind of propel you to whatever your goal may be, but those fuels like burn differently. So how does that fuel of like proving people wrong, how does that feel when you're using that as a core motor to accomplish goals? How would you describe that?
I don't know. When I was in college, I kind of felt it as like fuel. Like I just felt like it fueled me to do better, just to prove them wrong. And then when I actually accomplished the things that I did, it did make me feel like proud of myself. Which after I graduated college and all these things, I started to realize that these people that doubted me still didn't really care, I guess, that I succeeded in things. I didn't get the validation I was looking for. So I think that's something that I think is interesting now, because I no longer feel too inspired by, the doubts, because I feel like I know I can do it, and even if I prove them wrong, I'm not going to get the validation from them that I was looking for the whole time, I guess.
So what's inspiring you now?
I guess my own comfort and stability, like the things that make me really want to excel in my career and whatnot, is not wanting to be in an uncomfortable state of worrying about money or where I'm going to sleep, because those are things that I guess grew up worrying about, and so yeah, I think just comfortability and finding happiness.
What's the hardest thing you've been through?
Well, within the abuse of my mom, one of the times that she lost custody, she had actually tried to suffocate me with a pillow. And I remember...
How old were you?
I want to say I was 12, maybe. I know I was in junior high at the time. But I remember that really, that really hurt. I couldn't understand how she came to that conclusion. And I remember she called, my aunt at the time, and she was crying immediately. It was, I just tried to kill my daughter. I need you to take her now. So that's something, I still kind of struggle with. Yeah, and then that was another thing too, directly after that, the fact that she was able to just so easily, give up custody was another thing that I really struggled with.
Where are you at now? What's that?
I still question it. I don't know if it's something that I really will ever understand. The only thing that I can really come to conclusion with is that, she was an alcoholic and she had PTSD, and, I'm sure she was under the influence when it happened. So, I just assumed that she wasn't coping well, didn't get the help that she needed. So, I guess in that sense, yeah. And then I do feel, some type of sadness for her in that way.
What's one of the best things you've been through?
I guess it sounds so minor, but graduating college, I think, was one of the best feelings that I had. My grandparents were there, and my grandparents actually took me in when I was younger, dealing with a lot of the abuse I did on and off between second grade up until I graduated high school. So that meant a lot to me because they were older, coming all the way out 6 hours, I guess, from where they lived and being there. And my boyfriend's family came out and they all were there to support. And I was just really proud of myself because, I went to a university where, a lot of people had their parents help them pay for school and all this stuff. And, I was working 3 jobs and going to school. And I was just really proud of myself.
No student loan debt?
I wish. No, there's definitely some student loan debt. Yeah.
Come on, Pat. Forgiveness.
I know, I wish. I'm waiting for that to kick through, but.
So you had a taste of what family feels like when you graduated?
Yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way, but yeah. I didn't expect anybody to show up. So when they did, it was a really nice moment.
Do you have any regrets in life?
Yeah. I guess, when my mom went out to Mexico, one of the last things I told her was that I didn't want her part of my life anymore. And that was right before she passed. And she was just telling me that she loved me. And she messaged me on multiple occasions and I didn't respond. And so when I found out she passed, that is definitely a regret of mine. That, I was younger and I wasn't quite as understanding as to maybe some of the things that she was going through. I was a little bit more upset that she left us with a lot of responsibility.
Sounds fair. You never know when someone's gonna pass. Like it hits you out of nowhere. Do you think you can be at peace with that regret?
Yeah. It definitely doesn't bother me as much as it used to. I do think it's still, a little bit of a work in progress. But, it used to bother me a lot. It used to be one of those things that kind of kept me up at night. But I think as I've gotten older and started to realize, some of the things that she's gone through and just kind of went to her level a little bit, especially, as you get older, you kind of deal with some of your own trials and tribulations. And you start to realize that, like, your parents didn't know everything like you thought they did. They're not perfect. So they make mistakes too, they're only human. And so I think that's one of the things that kind of helped me out a little bit.
If you can go back to your younger self when you were, when your dad left and you're experiencing the abuse and the abandonment from your dad, the abuse from your mom, what would you tell your younger self?
I guess it's not your fault. I think that's the biggest thing because, like I said, I was a scapegoat in my family for a long time. So I remember, specifically my older brother and like a few people in my family that were like, well, if you didn't rebel so much, if you weren't so hard to take care of, maybe these things won't happen. So I think if I could go back to my younger self, I think that's one of the biggest things that I would say is, it's not your fault that these things are happening to you.
Do you have any questions for me? This is the open conversation part. Those are kind of the straight line questions.
Well, I don't know. I guess, you asked me, like, what is one of the hardest things that I've gone through? I guess I'm just curious.
What's one of the hardest things that I've gone through?
Yeah.
Oh, man, where do I start? There's layers, right? There's layers.
Yeah.
I think our deepest hurts happen when we're young. And I think as we get older, since we've already learned to manage with those deep hurts, those other hurts, we're a little bit more numb to it. So, for me, I think the biggest hurt that I had was the first time my mom, abused me and hit me, and it was violent and intense, and I felt the betrayal, and you know, I felt the pain of being hurt by the person I love the most. And the person you love the most can usually hurt you the most. That's just how it is. And, you know, from that point, you know, I've been through a lot of hard things. You know, I'm born and raised in LA. I went to prison when I was 18. There was, you know, riddled with violence. But that was like physical pain. It wasn't that deep internal pain where you feel it in your gut, in your heart, in every part, you know, from your head to your toe, where it just hurts, you know, on so many different levels. And you know, I do think the deepest hurt that I had was that first betrayal with, you know, with my mom. And when she, you know, she tied me up. I was a kid. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and you know, I could never sit still. You know, it's pretty wild. But still, that's no excuse. You know, she tied my hands and my legs, and you know, she hit me a few times with the belt. But just being tied and trying to make sense of that situation, kind of threw me for a loop. And you know, maybe I wouldn't remember it if that was the, you know, the only time that she, you know, that she was violent. But she then became consistently violent. Not as, I never feel it was as severe as that moment, but you know, hitting me with cords, with you know, you go grab the torch, but you know, these aren't just hits. Like these are like beatings. You know, where I'd get sent home from class because I have blood and a bruise on my neck, and cops would come to school because, you know, my body shows the abuse that much.
Mm-hmm.
Like that hurt.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's kind of almost the same, you know, answer that I gave. But no, I completely relate with you on, you know, people at school saying something. You know, I told you I was on probation for a little bit, and I know my probation officer came by one time and was like, "What's that on your eye?" And I remember telling him, "Oh, I just fell and I hit the coffee table," and he was like, "That doesn't look like that," you know. And I was like, "It is," and he's like, "If you're not going to say anything, I can't do anything." And I was just like, I'm not going to say anything. I don't know. How do you deal with that situation?
You can't. I
Yeah.
mean, you still, like, even as kids, you have like an instinct.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's an instinct. And I remember when the cops came to, I was in third or fourth grade, and I had a burn mark on my stomach. I had a scar for a long time. It's not there anymore. But my mom had heated up a steak knife and then burned my skin. And when the cops came to school, one, I knew the cop. My mom knew, like, you know, when you're really poor, like, you know, there's services
Mm-hmm.
out there that involve the police department, like, you know, where they're involved in the community to try and help impoverished kids. And my mom was, you know, in that, getting help from those groups. And we knew the officer. He was one of the community officers, and he came, and then he had his, you know, his partner, and you know, we went to the restroom. They're like, "Take off your shirt." Took off my shirt. I'll never forget it. His partner looked at my burn because it was fresh, and he was like, "Looks like someone heated up a knife and branded him." All right.
You're like, maybe.
And I was like, and they're like, "What happened?" I was like, I burned myself."
Mm-hmm.
I think the cops knew what was happening. They knew my mom too. I just went home with my mom, and I drove in the car with her, and like, you know, and that's one of the days where she was really nice. You know, it's tough to say because I also know that it was 6 of us. Like, if we had got put in a foster care, I do think that would have been a much more hard path.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes too because me and my siblings were, you know, looking to get into foster care. My grandparents, like I said, took us in, and I felt bad because they had already had my grandma's first daughter's kids, so there was already 4 kids in their house, and then she took in my mom's 4 kids, so there was 8 kids, you know, and 3 adults in the house. But that was an option, you know, that they were letting us know, like, this might happen. But, you know, looking back, I do think it may have been worse. I was in and out with my mom and my grandma a lot, and so were my siblings. But I do think it would have been a harder situation for us.
Especially if they had split you guys up. you know. And the only reason I know that, because when I went to jail, that's when I first heard like the horrors of foster care. Like, you know, I would ask, you know, my friends, you know, how'd you get here? All right, like there's, why are we all here? You know, what happened? And a lot of them who were in foster care, it was just, you know, you're getting bounced around, especially if you're a problematic child, you know, and meaning like if you just have ADD, like you're gonna get bounced around, you know, like, you know, and I would hear that and I would have a little bit of, you know, a lot more compassion for my mom. Like, hey, you know, she wasn't perfect, but I don't think I would have, I don't think I'd be alive if I went to foster care. You really have to hit the lotto to get, you know, and that happens.
Yeah.
It happens, you know,
Every
for
now and
sure.
then.
But the odds of that, I just don't think are that great, and the constant separation is just too intense for a kid.
I can agree, and I definitely think that, you know, I would probably would have bounced around a lot myself. I had a huge issue with just respecting authority in general, and, you know, I think that stemmed just from me not respecting my mom when I was younger. I just kept thinking, well, if, you know, how am I supposed to listen to you when you don't even know what you're doing, kind of thing. And my issue is I projected that onto all adults. It wasn't just, you know, her.
Even bosses at work?
Well, not after I got older, no. You know, after I graduated high school, or even, you know, I think a lot of it was pretty much fixed after my mom passed. I think this realization really set in that, like, hey, you don't have anybody there to take care of you, even if she wasn't, you know. Like, I always kind of assumed, like, well, there's her house, I can always go there if I need to, kind of thing. But after she passed, it was like, hey, you don't have parents, you don't have anybody to help you. You kind of got to step up to the plate and get a job and respect people, because, you know.
How was it? You said your grandparents or your uncles or aunt, what siblings or relatives
That I was living with.
stepped in and were like, hey, well,
My grandparents, they stepped in, but I was living with my cousins as well at the time. But that's just, you know, because my grandparents.
did you have fun times at your cousin's house?
I mean, yeah, I would say so. It was chaos all the time. So I would say it's fun. My grandparents definitely tried. I feel like they tried to make up for some of the things that we went through. You know, they bought trampolines, they had pools, like stuff like that. It's definitely very different from, you know, living basically in poverty with my mom. But there was fights, of course. I mean, sibling fights. You know, there were some of my cousins that definitely had a little bit more like I wouldn't necessarily say mental illness, but just mental troubles. So.
Such as, how's that look?
One of my cousins in particular, she was probably the oldest in the household. She would just kind of had like manic attacks, and I know at one point she threw a knife at my grandma. There was times that she was sent off to the psych ward because she was, you know, in her room talking to Harry Potter or Michael Jackson. She had these like real obsessions with those two characters for some reason. But yeah, it was mostly just violent kind of manic episodes. You know, I know me and her have gotten in physical altercations before. She has with my brother, so.
And that was part of the chaos, or just one component of the chaos?
I guess just one component. You know, there were definitely times that, you know, my mom was trying to, you know, sober up. And so she would come to the house, and I don't know how familiar, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with addiction, but yeah, you know, going through DTs and detox and stuff like that is not a pretty sight sometimes. You know, there was times she would hallucinate, she would have seizures, stuff like that, or even times, you know, where we would finally get back with our mom. My mom would get custody. She spent, you know, 3 to 6 months sober, and, you know, there would be relapses that, you know, just weren't pretty. But
looking back at where, you know, your childhood and growing up, are you amazed at where you're at now?
Yeah, I think honestly, after I graduated college was kind of really when it hit me the most. I know when I was in college and, working 3 jobs, everybody was just kind of like, I'm so shocked that, you turned out this way. And, you could have ended up, an addict like your mom or stuff like that. And to me, I guess I was just so busy and, struggling with school that I didn't necessarily think so. And I had a lot to work on mentally. But after I graduated college, and specifically after I got a job in my career, I kind of have imposter syndrome a little bit now.
How does that feel like? When
I,
it hits really hard, not just the generic, like the overview of it, like when there's a moment where like this really feels.
I don't know. I think most of it happens, like, especially like during work, when I'm at work and there's stuff expected of me. It just really anxious for the most part, but also almost like I don't deserve it for some reason. I don't know. I just feel in a lot of ways like I don't deserve this. Like, I don't know why. I just guess that's the feelings that come out.
Don't deserve the life, like I would venture to say, that there is a stark contrast in emotional feeling from, I don't know how many years ago it is for you when you moved and really started getting on your own, but from the chaos that you were raised in to where you're at now, everybody deserves peace.
Yeah, you know what? I know I started seeing a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. Well, I guess it is a psychologist, a therapist. Not too long ago. It was shortly after I moved here. Year and a half ago, maybe. And one of the things that she mentioned to me was that when things start to feel normal, especially since I've lived in chaos for so long, that it almost feels uncomfortable because you're not used to that. Like, you're used to chaos, so you're kind of waiting for the next ball to drop. You're kind of prepared. You're always kind of on edge, or very aware of your surroundings. And then when you finally get to a state where it's peaceful, it makes you uncomfortable a little bit, like weary, like you should be expecting something to happen. And so maybe that's where that feeling comes from, of like, I don't deserve this. Maybe it's just I'm not used to it. But I don't know. I think a lot of it too has to do with the negative talk from my family growing up too. I just had in my head, like, this is how I'm going to end up, or this is how things are going to be. And now that it's not, it's just a little bit hard for me to grasp.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I do think, for me myself, like, it's crazy, like the shift, right? When you really make a big leap into a new way of life, really a new way of feeling internally, and it's foreign. I remember, for me, I went through a deep depression myself, and I wanted to take my own life. I never had suicidal thoughts before, given, my childhood in prison and all that. Like, I never really, just something that never happened. And then I had those thoughts coupled with the hopelessness and worthlessness and just really all-time lows for me, externally and internally. I got fired from 3 jobs back to back. I couldn't keep a job. My addiction was at all-time high. My girlfriend at the time left me. My car got towed. It's just boom, 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 right in. That feeling was just out of this world, and I started getting out of that. And when I started healing, I remember getting up and standing in the kitchen. There's nobody there tonight. This wasn't at this place. It was at when me and my brother lived together, and it's like a really nice place. I just felt like someone was gonna attack me. I felt like I was gonna get, like, there's danger in the anxiety, and where there's a physical reaction. And for the first time in my life, like, I was able to catch that. And I stood in the kitchen and I was like, nobody's gonna hurt you. Like, that life's over. No one's out to get you. Like, it's okay. And, that was an incredible moment for me to know that, my body is just responding in a way that's to survive
Mm-hmm.
based on my life. And I have to let my body know, let myself know that I'm not there anymore. And, for me, I have fight or flight like crazy. It used to be way, way worse. But, I mean, I started fighting in high school through prison, and I was just a fighter, like I'd get the anxiety. The way I deal with my anxiety is to physically, let's address the issue right now, and I'd rather not feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter who it is, let's get this taken care of. And now, I can't, obviously I can't resort to physical violence. I have to find other ways to cope with that feeling. And I have to understand that, hey, I don't think I'm ever gonna be all the way healed. I think I'm on the healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm always gonna have moments where those things come back up. And it's just knowing to not let those feelings that can be big really affect the people around me, or at least communicate like, yo, this is what I'm going through. Like, I need to get away for a little bit. But yeah, I've had a hard transition with just being at peace and not having the drama and the chaos. And I just accept it. Like, it can be boring.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, it was hard for me to accept that as well.